I woke to my mother's voice. "Breakfast is ready, come down!" For a moment I lay still, tangled in my sheets, listening to the warm lilt of her tone drifting up the staircase. It was so familiar, so ordinary, that my heart almost fluttered with comfort. Almost. But then the weight of reality crushed me. My mother had died last year. The air in my bedroom turned icy, heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath with me. My heart slammed in my chest. My skin prickled as if invisible fingers were brushing against me. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, my breath shallow. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, that's not possible." But the voice came again, clearer, closer this time. "Elena, breakfast is getting cold." My blood turned to ice. My mother used to say that exact phrase every Sunday morning, her apron dusted with flour, her hands smelling of butter and cinnamon. It wasn't just a memory, it wasn't just my imagination. The sound rolled up the stairs with the same rhythm, the same affection, the same authority that had shaped my entire childhood. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. My throat tightened as though invisible hands were squeezing it shut. With trembling lips, I forced out the words, "Who are you?" A pause. A silence thick enough to drown in. Then, soft but steady, the voice replied, "I'm still here." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of my nightstand, my nails scraping against the wood. My eyes darted to the framed photo on the dresser, the one of my mother holding me as a baby, her eyes fierce with pride. Her face stared back at me through glass, frozen in time, as though mocking me with the impossibility of what I had just heard. The voice didn't call again. The house sank into silence, but the silence wasn't comforting. It pressed down on me like a shroud, suffocating, unnatural. I slipped my feet to the floor, the wooden boards cold against my skin. My body moved on instinct, one cautious step after another, as if I were walking toward the gallows. The hallway stretched before me, longer than it had ever seemed, shadows pooling in the corners like waiting predators. I stopped at the top of the stairs. The kitchen was directly below. My childhood memories of that space flooded back. The smell of bacon sizzling, the sound of my mother humming to herself, the faint crackle of the radio she always kept on, and now, nothing, just silence, heavy and waiting. My knees threatened to buckle, but I forced myself to whisper again, "Who are you?" The air shifted. The faintest scent reached me, threading up the stairwell, vanilla and nutmeg, my mother's baking. The scent that used to cling to her hair, her apron, her very skin. The scent that had vanished from this house the day she was lowered into the ground. A cold tear rolled down my cheek. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. "I miss you," I whispered, the confession ripping out of me like a secret I had never meant to say aloud. The house creaked in reply. Somewhere below, a chair scraped against the floor. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the top step. The sound had been unmistakable. The old wooden chair at the kitchen table, being pulled out just as it had every morning when my mother sat down with her coffee. But she was gone. Gone. Yet the chair had moved. The silence returned. Thick. Dreadful. Smothering. I couldn't go down. Not yet. My courage clung to me like wet clothes, heavy and useless. I backed away from the staircase, step by shaky step, until I was safely inside my room again. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned my back against it. That's when I realized something that made my stomach turn. The voice hadn't sounded distant. It hadn't drifted up the stairs like it used to. It had been right outside my bedroom door. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in my bed with the lamp burning beside me, my knees drawn to my chest like I was a child again. My ears strained for every sound in the house. Every creak in the wood felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind at the window felt like a whisper. When dawn finally came, pale light leaking through the curtains, I felt both relieved and terrified. Relief that the dark hours had passed. Terror because daylight wouldn't erase what I'd heard. My mother's voice. The same voice that had soothed me through nightmares. Scolded me for bad grades, cheered for me at school recitals. the voice that had gone silent when she took her last breath in that sterile hospital bed 1 year ago. I should tell you about her, about us. Maybe then you'll understand why hearing her again felt like both a blessing and a curse. My mother, Margaret, was a woman made of iron wrapped in lace. She was strict, too strict sometimes, but she loved me fiercely. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 6. We didn't have much, just this house and whatever she could make baking pies and cleaning houses. But she gave me everything she had. I loved her. I also resented her. She wanted me close, always. She hated when I talked about moving away. She said, "Elena, this house is your root." Without roots, trees die, but I wanted to be more than a tree tied to a single patch of dirt. I wanted to travel, to breathe beyond these walls. We fought about it again and again. Our arguments echoed in these very rooms, and when she got sick, when the cancer ate her from the inside out, I was still so full of stubborn pride that I spent more time avoiding her than being with her. I wasn't there when she died. That guilt clings to me like a shadow I can't shake. I'd been at work, convincing myself I couldn't stand to watch her fade away when the hospital called. By the time I arrived, she was gone. The bed was empty, still warm, her pillow still indented where her head had been. I've lived with that silence ever since. I kept the house, of course. Selling it would have felt like betraying her all over again, so I stayed. Alone. Every hallway still smells faintly of her perfume. Every shelf still holds her trinkets. Ceramic angels, recipe books with worn spines, framed photos of us smiling when life was simpler. Sometimes I wander into her bedroom, untouched since the funeral. The quilt she made still lies neatly across the bed. Her glasses rest on the nightstand. It's as though she only stepped out for a moment and might come back any second. Except she won't. That's what I thought until last night. Now I don't know what to believe, because it wasn't just a dream. I know what dreams feel like. Soft at the edges, fading as you wake. This wasn't like that. This was sharp, real, cutting. I felt the vibration of her voice in the air. I smelled her baking. I heard the scrape of her chair. If it wasn't her, then what was it? Grief? Madness? Some cruel trick of my brain, trying to comfort me by tearing open the wound again? Or something else entirely? I tried to shake it off as I moved through the day. I made coffee. I swept the kitchen floor. I checked the mailbox. Ordinary tasks. But everything felt wrong. The walls seemed to lean closer. The floor creaked louder. The air was heavier, like the house itself was watching me. When I finally sat at the kitchen table, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There were 2 plates set out. I hadn't put them there. Both plates were empty, but side by side, perfectly aligned, just the way my mother used to set the table every morning of my childhood. My knees went weak. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Stop it," I whispered to no one. "Stop playing with me." The plates gleamed in the morning light, silent, waiting. I left them there. I didn't have the courage to touch them. The plates stayed on the table all day. I couldn't bring myself to clear them away. Every time I walked past, they seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight, like they were waiting for food to be placed upon them, like she was waiting. By evening, I shoved them into the sink with a clatter just to end the staring. Porcelain cracked against porcelain. The sound echoed too long, as if the kitchen itself was protesting. I slept badly again that night. When I finally drifted into a restless half-dream, I saw her. My mother standing at the stove, stirring oatmeal in her old blue pot, her back to me. The radio hummed softly beside her, just like always. I opened my mouth to call to her, but before I could speak, she turned. Her face was wrong. Her eyes were black, her smile too wide, her skin stretched tight like wax left too close to the fire. She raised the spoon to her lips and whispered in that same sweet, terrible voice, "I'm still here." I woke with a gasp, sweat soaking my nightgown. The smell of burned oats filled the air. My stomach dropped. I stumbled to the kitchen, and there it was, the pot on the stove, smoke curling from inside, the oatmeal charred to black crust at the bottom. I hadn't cooked. I hadn't even touched that pot in months. I stood frozen, staring at it. My hand trembled as I reached forward and turned off the burner. The metal handle was hot, too hot, as if it had been cooking for hours. The silence after I shut off the flame was deafening. I left the pot where it was. I couldn't bring myself to clean it. The next morning, the smell of vanilla reached me before I even left my bedroom. My knees went weak. My mother used to make vanilla coffee on Sundays, always insisting it tasted like a hug for the soul. But the kitchen was empty, the coffee pot cold. Still, the smell clung to me, sweet and cloying, following me through every room. And then the whispering began. At first, just faint threads of sound in the corners, like a radio between stations. Then clearer. Words. My mother's words. Elena, don't be late for school. Elena, clean your room. Elena, I love you. Each phrase from my childhood, echoing through the walls, sometimes near, sometimes far. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't in the air, it was in the house itself. That night, the chair scraped again. This time, I didn't freeze. I forced myself to move. My legs shook, but I tiptoed to the bedroom door, pressed my ear against it. The kitchen was alive with faint sounds. Spoons clinking, a cupboard door closing, the sigh of the refrigerator opening. Every noise was achingly familiar. I wanted to believe. God, I wanted to believe it was really her. My throat ached with the longing, but the dread sitting heavy in my chest told me the truth. Something was wrong. The next day, I found muddy footprints by the back door. Small, bare feet. My mother's feet had been small, narrow, her toes crooked from years of hard work. I knew those prints, but she wasn't alive to make them. I cleaned them with trembling hands, scrubbing until the floor shone, as if erasing them could erase the truth. And then came the worst. Late at night, I heard her humming. Soft, low, the same lullaby she used to sing to me when storms rattled the windows. My body betrayed me. I cried. Hot, helpless tears streaked down my cheeks. "Mom?" I whispered into the darkness. "Is it really you?" The humming stopped. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then her voice, tender and cold all at once, slid into my ear as if she were standing right behind me. "Yes, Elena. It's me." I turned so fast I nearly tripped, clawing at the shadows, but no one was there. The corner was empty. Still, the air rippled as though something had just moved. My skin crawled. My heart thrashed. And yet, part of me wanted to hear her again. By the third night, I couldn't stand it anymore. The whispers, the humming, the smells of food that didn't exist. It was driving me insane. My nerves were frayed down to threads. Every time the house creaked, I jumped. Every time the refrigerator hummed, I thought it was her breathing. I had to tell someone. I called my oldest friend Claire. We've known each other since high school, though time and distance have made us more like polite acquaintances. Still, I needed a voice that wasn't my mother's. When I explained what I'd been hearing, she sighed the way people do when they're trying not to sound judgmental. "Elena," she said gently, "grief does strange things. You've been living in that house alone since she passed. Of course you're hearing things. Your brain is trying to fill the silence." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted that to be true. But my chest tightened, and I whispered back, "The oatmeal cooked itself, Claire. The plates set themselves. How do you explain that?" There was a pause. Then, carefully, she said, "You should see someone. A doctor, maybe a therapist." I bit back my anger. She thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But crazy people didn't smell their mother's perfume in the hallway, did they? I ended the call quickly, claiming I was tired. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next day, while I was watering the roses in the front yard, my neighbor, Mrs. Green, shuffled over. She's lived next door since I was a child, a woman who always smelled faintly of mothballs and peppermint. She lowered her voice and said to me, "Elena, I don't want to frighten you, but last night I saw your mother in the window." The watering can slipped from my hand. Cold water splashed my shoes. "What did you say?" My voice cracked. Mrs. Green nodded solemnly. "I saw her, clear as day. She was standing at the kitchen window, looking out. I almost called your name, but then she was gone." I couldn't speak. My lips moved soundlessly. "You know, houses remember," she added, as though that explained anything. "This one especially. Your mother put her whole soul into it. Maybe she hasn't left." She patted my arm, then hobbled back to her porch, leaving me shaking in the sun. So it wasn't just me. Someone else had seen her. That evening, I found myself in a small, dimly lit shop downtown. You know the kind. Dusty shelves cluttered with crystals, dream catchers, incense sticks, tarot cards. A bell tinkled as I pushed the door open, and the scent of sage and old paper hit me. A woman appeared from behind a curtain, draped in flowing scarves, her eyes sharp as needles. She looked me up and down before I could speak. "You're haunted," she said simply. I froze. "How do you—" "It clings to you," she interrupted, "like smoke." "Who is it?" My mother," I whispered. Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Sometimes spirits return because they're bound by love. Sometimes by something else. Guilt, anger, unfinished business. And sometimes, Elena, it isn't them at all. Sometimes it's something that wears their face, their voice." I shivered. "How do I know the difference?" She leaned closer, her breath hot with the smell of herbs. "Ask it a question only your mother would know, but be careful. If it isn't her, you'll know, and it won't like being tested." My stomach turned to stone. I left the shop with a small bag of protective charms and a mind even heavier than before. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table with the bag clutched to my chest, the humming started again. Soft, sweet, familiar. My hands shook. My throat was raw, but I forced out the words. "Mom? If it's really you, what did you whisper to me the night Dad left?" Silence. The humming cut off mid-note. For a long moment, nothing moved, nothing breathed. Then a sound came, low and sharp, like a laugh strangled into a hiss. My blood froze. The voice came, but it wasn't warm anymore. "You don't remember?" Shameful daughter. My hands went cold. The bag of charms slipped to the floor with a dull thud, and from the darkened hallway, the voice whispered again, cruel and deliberate. "I'm still here." After that night, the house changed. It no longer felt like my home, or even like a house at all. It felt like a mouth, swallowing me one breath at a time. The walls pressed closer. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Every step I took echoed too long, like the sound was being chased down dark corridors I couldn't see. And the voice, it was no longer soft, no longer motherly. At first, it accused. "Why did you let me die alone?" It hissed from behind the bathroom door. I dropped the toothbrush into the sink, foam spilling from my lips as I froze. "Why didn't you hold my hand when the machine stopped?" It whispered from the hallway. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't in the air. It was inside me, crawling through my skull like roots cracking stone. Then it turned threatening. "If you leave me, I'll never forgive you. If you try to run, I'll follow. If you tell anyone else, I'll make them see me too." The more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. The house began to echo with bangs and crashes. Cupboards slammed open in the middle of the night. Lights flickered until bulbs popped. Doors rattled in their frames as if fists pounded from the other side. And the smells. God, the smells. One night it was her perfume, cloying and sweet, thick enough to choke on. Another night it was burned meat, acrid and greasy, making my stomach twist until I retched in the sink. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. My reflection in the mirror grew gaunt, my eyes sunken, haunted. But the worst came in dreams. Night after night, I dreamed of breakfast. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the curtains. My mother stood at the stove, her back to me, frying bacon in her old cast-iron skillet. The smell filled the air, mouth-watering and nostalgic. But when she turned, her eyes were pits of darkness. The skillet dripped blood instead of grease. The bacon writhed like worms. And she would smile that too wide smile, her teeth sharp, her tongue black, and whisper, "Eat, Elena. Eat what I've made for you." I always woke before I touched the plate, heart racing, sheets soaked. One night I woke to find the dream wasn't over. The smell of bacon lingered in the real kitchen. Faint smoke drifted up the stairs. I ran down, terror clawing at my throat, and found the stove on, skillet burning, grease popping and hissing. I shut it off with shaking hands. My mother's voice drifted over my shoulder, low and mocking. "You're welcome, darling." I spun, but no one was there. By the fourth week, the house wasn't just haunted. It was alive. Shadows moved where light should have held them still. Corners seemed deeper, darker. Windows reflected not my face, but hers, watching, smiling, always smiling. I tried leaving once. I packed a bag, car keys in hand, but when I opened the front door, the air outside was wrong. It shimmered, thick and warped, like heat rising from asphalt. Beyond the threshold, the world twisted into shapes I didn't recognize. Trees bent at impossible angles, the sky a bruised red, and the voice roared, loud enough to shake the walls. "You're mine, Elena. You can't leave me now." The door slammed in my face with such force it rattled the pictures from the wall. Glass shattered across the floor. I dropped to my knees, sobbing, trapped. That night, as I lay in bed, with the covers pulled to my chin, the voice grew quieter, softer again, as though trying to soothe me after the storm. "Don't fight me, sweetheart. I only want us to be together." I shut my eyes tight. Tears slipped down my temples into my hair. "You're all I have," it whispered. And in that moment, I hated myself. Because despite the fear, despite the torment, part of me wanted to believe it. Part of me wanted my mother back so badly that I almost welcomed the nightmare. Almost. I thought I knew my mother. Strict, yes. Loving in her own way. A woman who lived by the Bible, who crossed herself before every meal, who scolded me if I so much as muttered a curse word. But beneath that rigid exterior, there had always been warmth. Or so I believed. Until I opened the box. It was late one evening, after another sleepless night of voices crawling through the walls, after another day of cupboards slamming and lights bursting overhead. I was in her room, the one I had left untouched for a year, looking for something, anything, that would tell me what was happening. That's when I noticed the false panel in her wardrobe. It was small, tucked at the very back, behind old cardigans that smelled faintly of lavender. I'd never seen it before. With shaking hands, I pried it loose. Behind it sat a shoebox wrapped in twine. My stomach sank as I lifted it out, dust coating my fingers. Inside were letters, old, brittle envelopes tied with yellow ribbon, and a journal. I sat on her bed, the quilt scratching my legs, and began to read. The letters weren't to me. They weren't even to family. They were written to someone named Marjorie, a name I didn't recognize. Each one was dated decades ago when my mother was barely older than I am now. At first, they seemed harmless. Talk of long nights, secret meetings, the circle. But as I read, the words grew darker. Phrases leapt off the page. The ritual worked. We heard their voices at dawn. If we bind them to this place, we'll never be alone. I dropped the letter, my hands trembling. Never be alone. The journal was worse. Pages filled with careful handwriting, recipes not for bread or pie, but for summoning, binding, warding. Diagrams of circles, symbols scrawled in margins, instructions written in a language I didn't recognize, and one entry that made my heart stop. If I pass before Elena is ready, I will not leave. I will stay. She must learn. She must carry it on. My voice will guide her. I couldn't breathe. My mother, my God-fearing, church-going mother, had been part of something else, something occult. And she had planned this. The voice in the house wasn't an accident. It wasn't a haunting born of grief. It was deliberate. She had made herself stay, but was it really her? Or had she opened the door to something else? I read on, desperate for answers. One line, scrawled at the bottom of a page, felt like a blade in my chest. If she resists me, I'll make her see. I'll make her stay. I slammed the book shut, my breath ragged, my heart a hammer in my chest. "Mom," I whispered, though the word tasted like ash now. "What did you do?" The air in the room shifted. The curtains lifted though the window was closed. The lamp flickered, and her voice slid from the corner, thick with amusement. "You found it." I dropped the journal, backing against the headboard. "You," my voice cracked. "What are you? Are you really her?" A pause. Then soft and mocking, "I'm still here." The words rattled through me like chains. I snatched up the journal, flipping frantically through the pages. One passage caught my eye. A banishment ritual, half finished, as if she'd never completed it. My hands shook so badly I could barely read, but I caught the gist. A fire, a circle, a breaking of ties. I had no idea if it would work, but if this thing wasn't my mother, if it was something that had worn her voice, her face, her love like a mask, then I had no choice. I had to end it. The night I decided to fight back, the air itself seemed to know. The house groaned louder than usual, as if protesting. The windows rattled in their frames. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. Every step I took echoed with a hollow finality, like walking through a cathedral before confession. I gathered what I needed from the journal: chalk for a circle, candles, a bowl of salt, and the matches I always kept in the drawer. My hand shook so violently I nearly spilled the salt, but I forced myself to move with purpose. If I faltered now, I'd lose. I set the circle in the center of the living room, my mother's favorite room, the room where she used to knit while watching TV, where we shared popcorn during stormy nights. Now it would be our battlefield. As I lit the candles, her voice slithered from the shadows. "Elena, what are you doing?" It was gentle at first, a mother's chiding tone, but I wasn't fooled anymore. "I'm ending this," I whispered, my voice raw. The air chilled. My breath fogged in front of me. "Elena!" Louder now. "You're making a mistake!" The walls shuddered. Pictures fell from nails, glass shattering across the floor. The lights blinked out, leaving only the flicker of the candles. And then she appeared. At first, it was her, my mother, standing at the edge of the circle, wearing her favorite floral nightgown, her silver hair pulled back, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her eyes glistened with tenderness. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "it's me. Don't do this. I came back for you. I stayed because you needed me." Tears burned my eyes. For a split second, I wanted to step forward, to bury myself in her arms, to let the weight of grief collapse into comfort. But then her smile widened, too wide. Her teeth were too sharp. Her eyes flickered black, and her hands, once folded so neatly, curled into claws. "You're not her," I choked out. "You're not my mother." The thing shrieked. The sound was inhuman, piercing, vibrating through the floorboards. The candles guttered, nearly extinguished. Shadows clawed across the walls like hands reaching for me. I dropped to my knees, chalk in hand, and began to chant the words from the journal. The language felt foreign on my tongue, sharp and jagged, but the circle glowed faintly as I spoke. The entity slammed against the barrier, her face twisting between my mother's and something monstrous. Skin splitting, jaw unhinging, eyes rolling white. "Elena," it howled, "ungrateful daughter. You left me to die alone. You owe me." My voice cracked, but I kept chanting, louder now, pouring every ounce of strength into the words. The figure clawed at the circle, sparks flying where her fingers met the invisible boundary. Smoke curled from her hands as if the barrier burned her. "Stop!" she shrieked. "You'll lose me forever." Tears streamed down my face. I already lost you, I screamed back. The journal's instructions ended with fire. I grabbed the matches, struck one, and dropped it into the bowl of salt mixed with herbs. Flame roared up, golden and furious, filling the circle with searing light. The entity shrieked, stumbling back, her form rippling like water disturbed. For a moment, I saw my mother again, fragile, weak, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Elena," she whispered, broken, "don't send me away. Please." I faltered. My heart tore in two. But then I remembered the journal, the line written in her hand. "If she resists me, I'll make her see. I'll make her stay." My grief curdled into rage. "You're not her!" I roared, and with one final chant, I hurled the burning bowl into the center of the circle. Flames shot upward, engulfing the figure. She screamed, high, piercing, desperate. The walls trembled, the floorboards buckled, the windows shattered outward in an explosion of glass. And then, silence. The figure was gone. The candles guttered out, leaving only the acrid smell of smoke and salt in the air. My ears rang, my body shook so violently I collapsed to the floor, sobbing. It was over, or at least I prayed it was. The morning after felt like waking in someone else's life. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No footsteps in the hall, no whispering from the walls, no smell of perfume or smoke, just silence. I sat in the living room where the circle had burned itself into the wooden floorboards, the blackened marks etched like scars. The candles had melted into puddles of wax, the air still carrying the faint sting of salt and ash. It was over. But endings rarely feel like victory. I thought banishing her, banishing it, would free me. Instead, I felt hollow, like I'd carved out not only the darkness, but also the fragile thread that still tethered me to her. For the first time in months, the voice was gone. And yet, I caught myself listening for it. I spent the following days cleaning the house, sweeping glass, scrubbing scorch marks, throwing out what I no longer needed. The journal and letters I kept in a locked drawer. I couldn't bear to destroy them yet. They were the only proof that I hadn't gone mad, that what happened was real. Sometimes I'd stop mid-task, hand hovering in the air, waiting for her to scold me for missing a spot, or remind me how she used to polish furniture until it gleamed. The silence that answered was sharper than any scream. The grief came back, not the twisted, suffocating grief that had trapped me here, but the raw, unadorned kind, the kind that had no illusions, no voices, no false comfort, just absence. I realized then, grief had a voice all along. It wasn't hers, it was mine. A week later, I went to the cemetery. It was the first time since her funeral that I dared to come back. The grass was overgrown around her headstone, the engraving worn but still legible. Margaret Dawson, beloved mother, 1958 to 2023. I knelt, brushing away leaves with trembling hands. "Hi, Mom," I whispered. My throat tightened. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if what I fought was you or something pretending or both, but I need you to know I love you, and I'm letting you go now." The wind stirred through the trees, soft and cool against my cheek. No whispers followed, no tricks, just the world moving on. I closed my eyes, pressed my forehead to the cold stone, and finally allowed myself to cry, not from fear, not from guilt, but from love. When I left the cemetery, I didn't go back to the house, not right away. I booked a small cabin outside the city, nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a bed that wasn't haunted. For the first time in a long time, I slept without dreams. Each day that passed, I felt lighter. The world outside my grief slowly crept back in. Birds singing, laughter from neighbors, the smell of rain on fresh earth. Life, stubborn and unyielding, filling in the cracks. I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin forever. At some point, I'd have to decide, return to the old house or start somewhere new. But for now, it didn't matter. For now, it was enough to simply breathe. On my last night there, I lit a single candle by the window. Not for rituals, not for protection, not for banishment. Just as a reminder. I whispered, "Good night, Mom." And when the flame flickered, I didn't imagine it meant anything more than a draft in the room. I smiled through my tears. For the first time, that was enough.